Hi everyone. Before we get into this Q&A session, I thought I should just say thank you to all of you who sent in questions, so many questions in fact, that I've realised that I can't do them all justice by answering them all in one go. So what I've decided to do here is to answer the questions in batches. So if you sent in a question by email, which is what most of you have done, then your question will almost certainly be answered in this video or in part 2, which I'm going to try and get up very quickly after part 1. There's a whole bunch of other questions that came in via YouTube, which I'm going to do last, largely because many of these questions I've actually already given some kind of answer on the YouTube website. But please rest assured, if you've asked a question, you will get an answer. And if it's not in this first video, please don't be too disappointed. It will definitely be coming. I hope you enjoy this video. Cheers. So this is from Andrew Fouracre. Hi Steve, what would the track listing for United States of Being have looked like if you'd proceeded with its release? That's a good question. First of all, we never really got that far. There never was a projected track listing, I'm afraid. But what I can tell you, it was that although we recorded so many songs, I mean, there's well over 30 songs that are completed, plus a whole bunch of others that, for example, didn't get vocals on. But that's way too many to include on an album. And I looked through the archive and I've listened to all these tunes now, and I've noticed that the batch of songs that we recorded up until the middle of 2008, they're a lot more mellow than the songs that we recorded from the end of 2009 onwards. So that's basically the two versions of the album. And I think even though ultimately I prefer the songs from the first attempt, I think the album probably would have focused on the songs from the later attempt because they were just more up-tempo. They were more dancey. I suppose they were easier to get onto playlists and maybe the radio, that kind of thing. So the track listing probably would have concentrated on those tunes, but as I said, we never really got that far. One thing I am intending to do though is once I've got a few more of these songs out of the archive and up onto YouTube, I'm going to make a YouTube playlist which puts the songs in a kind of, well, I suppose track running order that makes sense musically. So it wouldn't be that you're listening to United States of Being version 1 and then United States of Being version 2, but more like you're listening to, I suppose, a double album, something like that. I don't know, but just it would make sense musically to listen to the album in that way. Michael says, hi Steve, looking forward to your Q&A session. I will be interested to know the answers to any of these questions that I've long wondered. Okay. And so I have quite a few questions here. So question number 1 is about the song Ghost. Ghost was written by you about your own experiences. So did you ever talk to Sarah why she always broke down while singing it? No. No. I mean, I suppose I just kind of assumed that Sarah was moved by the song and it was like a sort of natural expression of how she felt about what was being discussed in the song. So I suppose it would have been, maybe it wouldn't have been entirely appropriate to kind of question why Sarah was so moved. I don't know. What I can tell you though, and I think I've mentioned this in the blog, when we were rehearsing for the Lexington show, which was in 2013, Sarah was getting quite upset singing Ghost just, without an audience. And so I told her the story about what happened when I spoke to the person that the song was written about years after the event, and basically asked her what she thought. Now, I thought that she was going to be touched, moved, that kind of thing. But actually, it turned out that she said that at the time she was really annoyed, and I was stunned. And I realised, she explained it to me, and I kind of realised later that the problem with this song from her perspective was that I had had this opportunity to bare my soul and be this kind of essentially injured sort of hero, with Sarah singing my song to hundreds of thousands of people all across the world, where she didn't have an opportunity to do anything like that at all. And yeah, it really made me reflect a lot on the songwriting process and how the perspective of a writer, particularly when I'm writing, I try to be sincere and truthful, and I try to be fair. But maybe you could argue that that isn't the role of the writer. The role of the writer maybe is to indulge themselves and to, go into their inner heart and just say, I feel this, even if in the cold light of day that might not be fair on the other person. I kind of explained all of this to Sarah before the gig, but if you were there at the gig, you would know that Sarah still cried. One thing, whilst we're talking about Ghosts, that I find fascinating, and I talk about quite a lot in the songwriting lectures that I have given at BIM and now at Waterbear and Middlesex University and lots of other places. It's about the differences between what you tend to write in your 20s as opposed to what you write maybe from your 30s onwards. And basically, it feels to me that the focus of your life and your emotions in your 20s, the focuses are on relationships and working out how they're supposed to be, trying to understand yourself, trying to understand somebody else, basically getting it wrong, even with the best of intentions. And when you do get it wrong, or when somebody else gets it wrong on your behalf, the result is something that's quite magnificent. It's exciting, it's emotional, it can be heartbreaking. But there's a sort of heroic aspect to this, which enables you to write a song that's as emotive as Ghost and not feel too self-conscious about it. By way of contrast, as you get older, especially into your late 30s and beyond, the trials and tribulations of a relationship become less interesting. And there's a long period in your life where if things go well, then great. If things go badly, well, it's a shame. But there's probably not a lot of material there for an interesting song. I actually think that it's around about this time of life where, if you're lucky, you've been with someone for 20 or 30 years. I'm 54 right now, and I met my wife when I was 27. So we've been together a long time. There comes a point where relationships become really interesting again because you have such a body of experience together that you kind of have developed a support structure and a view of the world that pays dividends as you age. As doors may be closing or certain things ending, that's kind of inevitable. I think that relationships get interesting again at this point. But there's this whole bit in the middle where, they're not really that interesting. So this is from John Duckworth. Thanks, John. John says, "Hi, Steve. Thanks for taking these questions. I'm sure you may have answered some of these before. Could you talk about how you came to include the owner of a Lonely Heart sample on No More Talk, and what your thoughts are on Trevor Horn productions. Well, Trevor Horn first, I suppose. I grew up in the 80s, and of course, Trevor's work was ubiquitous throughout that time. And it sounded amazing to me. In fact, actually, one of the first albums I ever owned was The Age of Plastic by the Buggles, which of course was a Trevor Horn record. That was a birthday present for me, I think, when I was 10. I got 4 albums. There was Tube by Army Replicas, and Gary Newman's Pleasure Principle, plus The Age of Plastic. So I think you can kind of tell which direction I was going, even at the age of 10. And with The Age of Plastic, I absolutely loved it. I mean, the song, The Plastic Age, is amazing. Absolutely amazing. And of course, Video Killed the Radio Star. My favourite was a song called I Love You, Miss Robot, which has kind of got a sort of, I don't know, kind of a bossa nova feel to it. And Trevor Horn singing through a vocoder. So, of course, I'm going to love that. I listened to it just recently. It's brilliant. It's completely stood the test of time. Sounds really good. So, yeah, a big fan. Also, I like the stuff he was doing with The Art of Noise. I kind of got into them through being interested and into early hip-hop stuff, the sort of electro stuff with people doing body popping and break dancing. I think one of the Art of Noise tunes, I think it was Beatbox, was kind of regularly used by break dancers to do their breaking to. So I thought, yeah, that sounds great. So yeah, Trevor Horn. Oh yeah, one more. I recently heard Cry by Godley and Cream, which I know is a Trevor Horn production. That's a great record, isn't it? It just sort of slowly pulses along, and yet you go on this lovely journey. That sample comes from a CD-ROM that I bought for the samplers that were used on Disgraceful and the Goodbye album. So basically a CD-ROM was a collection of samples that were royalty-free that you could include in your recordings. What I hadn't realised was that the people who put that CD-ROM together had basically sampled a whole lot of other people's records and then sold the samples on. So I'd stuck that sample at the front of No More Talk and didn't realise until the song came out that it was a sample from Yes's Owner of a Lonely Heart. I assume that when the Yes record was made, it was a sample that was just from a sample library that came with the Fairlight CMI, which was a sampler that was used on that record. And so, I don't know whether there was a copyright infringement there or not. I simply don't know. What I do know is that when the single came out, in interviews, if I was asked about that sample, I would say something along the lines of, oh, isn't that exactly what you would expect Dubstar to do, to include a sample from a song called Owner of a Lonely Heart? You know, that kind of thing. But that seemed to go down quite well, and we never got into trouble with that. Yeah, I think I'd be a bit more careful these days, though. One more question from John. I always appreciated the effort that went into your B-sides. Song number 9 being a favourite. What kind of pressure were you under from the record company to release multiple songs for every single? And would you have preferred to hold them back for an album? Pressure? Almost none. You see, the record company was focused on selling albums. This was the 90s. And so the purpose of a single was for that song to be like an advert for the album. And you would hopefully get it on the television, get it onto radio. And essentially the music that went with the A-side, with the sort of song that everyone was focused on, was a bit of an afterthought, at least in terms of where the record company was coming from. But that was not the attitude that we had within Dubstar. Particularly Chris and I, we were big Smiths fans, and remember as kids that whenever a Smiths single would come out, what was more interesting than what was on the A side was very often what was on the B side. And I think it was the fact that they included so many brilliant B sides that meant we were both such big fans, you know. And so that was what we wanted for Dubstar as well. that every single would include new songs, and essentially as many new songs as possible. So there wasn't really any pressure, and I loved writing and recording those tunes because I realised later that it was a unique experience. Whatever we recorded was almost certainly going to be released. So that meant that the pressure was almost entirely off. Because they were going to be the B-sides of a single that was probably going to do quite well, it meant that thousands of people were going to hear these tunes that were, I suppose, recorded in a more relaxed fashion than the albums had been recorded. I think that really shows through, in fact, when you listen to the B-sides now, that in some ways it's almost a different band. You also say, would you have preferred to hold them back for an album? No. And in fact, there was one instance where Andy Ross from Food Records had intended to put song number 9 on the next Dubstar album, which was Goodbye. And I sort of said to him, no, there's lots of other songs. And, you should hold on for them. The thing was that I had so many songs, same problem I have now really, so many songs that I sort of felt like, well, it's been released, we should move on and not reuse songs. It's one of the reasons why I wasn't that keen on putting The View from Here on Goodbye, but there we go, it happened. What I think would have been really interesting, to imagine a situation where you had an act like Dubstar, where all the songs that were recorded were intended to be B-sides and recorded as B-sides in that kind of relaxed atmosphere, but actually ended up as an album. So, 11 songs that were written supposedly for B-sides that then get released as an album. That would have been really interesting. This is from Thomas Shimak. Hi, Steve. First things first, thank you. I wrote it a couple of times already on various social media, but you can never say thank you too often, can you? Cheers, Thomas. Thank you for releasing all those gems to the wild. Well, it really is my pleasure and privilege. I've got a couple of questions, and that's true. I'm just going to go to question number 3, and I will do the others at another point. Question number 3 is, are all the songs from the archive already mastered versions, or do you still consider them demos? It depends. There's a few that I've put up. Well, actually, there's one I put up already that is definitely a demo, which is the early version of Talking in My Sleep. I think it sounds like a demo as well, particularly on the vocals. And of course, there was a few other versions of that song, including one that Stephen Hague recorded. So I would consider those later ones to be completed versions. In terms of everything else, no, they are completed. Those are the finished versions of those songs, and they're mastered as well. I have noticed that the sound quality, I think everybody notices this, but the sound quality on YouTube isn't that great. So please do bear that in mind. But so far, every tune that I've released, apart from Talking in My Sleep, is a completed and mastered version of that song. Thomas also asks, where did you live in Stockholm? I lived there myself from 2001 to 2006. A beautiful city, maybe my favourite. I was also the time I waited for the reunion of Dubstar to happen. I think I was also there. I saw Klein live in Stockholm too. Thomas, I never lived in Stockholm, but I did visit regularly. It sort of became like a second home, if you know what I mean, like a kind of a musical home for me. And this was during a period, it would have been early 2000s through to about 2006, 7, that kind of time, when I was doing a lot of professional songwriting with other production teams and for other artists and that kind of thing. And at the time, and it still really is the case now, Stockholm is the centre of the songwriting world. And I fell in love with the city. I mainly stayed, at least in the early part of the noughties, in Södermalm or Södermalm. My Swedish pronunciation is an embarrassment, so I'm sorry if I'm mangling these words. But towards the end, I used to stay in Oosterman in a place called Barnes, or which reads like Burns in English, which is a very fancy, very great looking hotel and venue, music venue that's on the sort of big main island that Stockholm is built on. And yeah, just fell in love with the city. I haven't been back in a long time, actually. Last time I went back, which wasn't for professional reasons, was in 2015. I went over during midsummer, and I didn't realise that midsummer in Stockholm, basically everything closes. And so there was me and Claire, and we were there for like 4 nights with nothing to do. And of course, like being midsummer, it was basically daylight for 24 hours. It was a very strange trip, but I'm looking forward to going back there really soon. Love Stockholm. Jeremy Arnold writes, "Hi Steve, I'm sure others will ask the interesting and introspective questions for you to answer. Here is mine. I had a picture of you, Chris and Sarah on my bedroom wall when I was a youth. How does that make you feel?" Well, tonight in 2023, a little bit awkward, if I'm honest, Jeremy. However, going back, I don't know, 25 years, I would have been really flattered that that you liked the act so much that you put our photo on your bedroom wall. So thanks for that. I know when I was a kid, what I had on my bedroom wall, I had one wall which was covered in Melody Maker interviews with the bands that I liked, which was people like the Cocteau Twins and Dead Can Dance. And on the other, there was a whole load of wrapping paper. I thought it would be really cool to put little bits of wrapping paper up on the wall because it looked kind of psychedelic and very 4AD-ish, I suppose. I didn't know what psychedelic meant. I mean, I was, just a kid. But I can imagine if my parents had any kind of insight into the world of drugs, it would have looked like I was, covering a wall with swirly patterns and then sitting back and taking acid or mushrooms and enjoying my wall whilst listening to this crazy kind of psychedelic music. But that wasn't happening. I was 16. A question here from Alex Greenwood Tuck. "Hello, Steve. I hope you're well." Yep, I'm good, mate. Thank you. "I have a few questions below for the Dubstar Q&A." Yeah, there's quite a few questions here, Alex. I'm probably just going to answer the first one, and I'll do the others. I'm probably going to have to do at least one more Q&A because there's so many questions I haven't covered. And anyway, so you say, "Firstly, thanks for all the informative and detailed posts you make about the band's history and work. I've been a fan since the first album days, but never caught the band live, and only ever saw small and generic bits of Dubstar news in Enemy or Melody Maker. There's a lot of stuff I wondered about for years, and it's been very interesting to read. What are your big favourite Dubstar songs, and what do you like so much about them?" Gosh, okay, it's really difficult. I don't listen to Dubstar very often. It's. I suppose I'm just, busy doing other things. But if I were to listen to Dubstar, I think the songs that really work for me now are, I think there's some obvious ones. Stars, Day I See You Again from Disgraceful. I think they're both really good. I still love song number 9, which was an early B-side off Manic. And I Lost a Friend I think there's something really special about that song. There's something about it that just really works for me. And a song that I know that none of you have heard yet, but will be up on the archive soon, is a song called So Say We All, which it gets me every time. And I think if I was to explain what it is that all these songs have in common, what it is that sort of speaks to me is I think that they're examples where I really feel like lyrically they were saying exactly what it was that I wanted to say. And then as a consequence of that, the music just gels with that lyric really well. Each one of those songs, maybe not Stars, although maybe, but they were all written lyrics first. And I've just found that with my own writing, getting a lyrical idea clear in my head before sitting down in front of the piano or making a record makes the process so much more enjoyable and leads to better results. So also with each of those songs, you end up going through a kind of lyrical journey, and you end up somewhere different, I think, than where you start. So I think that's kind of really important for me. It's more of a feeling than a literally different place, like in terms of the words, but you feel like you've gone somewhere, particularly with this song, So Say We All. Email from Christian. He says, "Hi Steve, thank you for taking the time to answer some questions from the fans out there. It's my pleasure. I've been a fan of DUBSTAR's music since Disgraceful. I may have posted this story before about how I discovered the group, but I can't recall. I was at an indie store in Dallas, Texas back in 1995, and on their wall they had the Disgraceful CD. There was something about the artwork that said, 'Listen to this CD.' Well, that's what you would hope from artwork. It's done its job." Nice one. "As the store had listening stations, I popped the CD on and was instantly hooked. From that moment, DUBSTAR became another favourite band to collect. Every year since 1996, when I would go over to visit my friend in London, we'd go to all the well-known indie music stores in London looking for CDs and vinyl of our favourite groups. I couldn't believe all the DUBSTAR promo 12-inch singles I managed to acquire. Now, I know I should probably ask some deep and probing question about the music DUBSTAR did back in the day, but I'll try to keep it light and simple and ask you this. Did you collect any of the promos and foreign pressings of DUBSTAR from Disgraceful to Make It Better? This has always been a curious question I've wanted to ask a band. Thanks." Simple answer to the question is kind of yes and no. The thing was, I don't know if you're aware of this, but before DUBSTAR was signed, I'd actually already worked in music retail, and I'd also worked at a record company called Pinnacle Records, which was a distributor. And I had, and also being a DJ, I had hundreds of promos all around in my flat. I mean, white labels of tunes by, like, New Order was a big one, Duretti Column, because I was working with Factory Records, who were distributed by Pinnacle at the time, so I had loads of stuff from them. So when the promos came out for the DUBSTAR records, I thought they were nice, and I thought they were probably, I should have one, but because I had so many promos of other records as well, I really didn't keep track of them. So I don't have an extensive DUBSTAR collection. There are some significant releases that are missing from my collection. For example, I don't have the vinyl version of Disgraceful, the double album with all the amazing artwork. I don't have it. I think I just didn't bother to ask at the time. I don't have the Japanese version of anything that the band released. I don't have American versions of anything that we released. It was, I don't know. I mean, I really wasn't bothered at the time, but now that you brought it up, yeah, it is a bit of a shame that I don't have these things. But having said all of that, behind there is one of the lofts in this house, and most of that is dedicated to DUBSTAR paraphernalia. And so, you know, maybe if I look through all of that stuff, I might actually find these promos. I don't know. But, of course, if anyone's got a spare DUBSTAR Disgraceful on vinyl, let me know. This is from Rich from Norway. "Hi, Steve. Finally, thanks for bringing out a load of great music into the world." Thank you. A few things on my mind this morning. I'm going to answer all of your questions, Rich, but maybe not all in one go here, because I'm answering so many questions. I'm losing my voice here a little bit. But I'm going to go straight on to question number 2 from you. You say, music videos. What determines the birth of a DUBSTAR music video? Sometimes I see artists never releasing a music video on some decent songs. I think music videos add a more personal meaning to the song if the artist has full control of it. Granted, they can be a lot of effort to produce, i.e. would be great to see more of them. I haven't made a music promo video in a long time. In fact, actually, the last music promo video I was involved in was the promo for the DUBSTAR release of Window Pane. This was 11 years ago now. Never actually happened, but it reminded me that I'm not really a big fan of making videos. I don't mind doing this, but music promo videos, they're very long processes. So what I can talk about, though, is the videos that you see for DUBSTAR from the EMI days. Basically, music videos back in those days were expensive, and they were also political in the sense that very often it was the commissioning editors or the commissioners at EMI who had the say over who was going to be directing the video, who was going to be making the video, and often what the treatment would be, which is, of course, what would be happening in the video. So although we had a sort of final veto on what was going to be in a video and not what the treatment was going to be, what we're going to cooperate with, ultimately it came down to what the record company wanted to do. I regret this, actually. I think that there are a couple of DUBSTAR videos that are really good, but I know that I wasn't really paying a great deal of attention to what was going on in these videos because, quite frankly, I was doing other things. And I've never really been a big fan of promo videos anyway. Just, I suppose really wasn't my thing. I do know that Chris had a lot to say about these videos. So he would often be talking to Trudy at EMI about this. But I think that there were some significant missed opportunities. For example, the video for Anywhere is very poor, I have to say, and also completely inappropriate. On the other hand, I think the video for Manig is great, and also for Stars. And I also really like the video for A Girlfriend as well. Not so much any of the others. I don't really think they work. Plus also, I think that how the act was being portrayed wasn't quite right. I feel that the videos have really aged, and I don't think I can blame anyone for that. They are of their time, the mid and ultimately late 90s. But we didn't really have that much hands-on involvement with the videos. A question from Paulo in Brazil, who says, "Dear Steve, perhaps this question has already been answered, but which is your favourite DUBSTAR song and why?" Yeah, I have kind of answered this question. I have mentioned there's a selection that I still really love, but I think I can give you two answers to this. I can tell you my favourite song that I've ever written, or at least my favourite song I've ever written today, if you know what I mean, how I feel today, and also my favourite DUBSTAR song overall. So let's start with DUBSTAR. I think the most important song has to be Stars. And this is because Stars really opened up the music industry to the act. With Stars, it was the song that really put the act, although it was just brief, it put the act on the international stage. It was Stars that gave us the opportunity to record the first, second and third album. The success of that tune really meant that there was a lot of confidence in the music industry that we could do more really, great stuff. And so, in a sense, it was that song that opened the doors for really everything that happened after it. So that, I think, is the most important DUBSTAR song. And I do like it. It's funny, I kind of said in interviews and sometimes in the blog that I didn't really hear what other people heard in Stars at the time. But now when I listen to it, I'm playing it on the piano, there is a certain, I don't know, it just feels right. It's a properly accomplished song. I don't know, maybe accomplished isn't the right way of putting it, but it just feels right. And I was very lucky, I think, to write that at the time when I wrote it, and also to have a singer as amazing as Sarah sing it, and all the things that happened to me as a consequence of that song. But my favourite song that I've written is something that I released with the Brighton Cassette Club, which came out, I think it was the Christmas before last, just on YouTube. Very sort of limited kind of release, which was a song called How Were We Supposed to Know? And it was a song that I recorded with a friend of mine, Shannon, who's great. And there's something about the feel of that song and the lyric which gets me every single time. I know what that song is about. It's about a very specific thing, which I'm not going to share here because, you know, I'd love for you all to have a listen to it and you can make up your own minds about what it's about. But it moves me. It touches me. And I know it's kind of a weird thing to hear a writer say that about his or her own work. But there's something about that song. It feels like it didn't actually come from inside me. It came from somewhere else. And so, yeah, it gets me every time. Plus also Shannon sung it perfectly. That was the perfect kind of way of singing that tune. But in some ways, a bit like Sarah, kind of slightly detached, but with that sort of strong accent that makes it feel real. And this is from Dave Palese. Sorry, Dave, if I've got your surname wrong there. It looks Italian to me, so Palese. Any chance we'll see deluxe editions of the first 3 albums? There's such a wealth of B-sides, brackets pure quality, thank you, unreleased tracks and demos, plus nearly every single had exclusive commercially unavailable remixes relegated to promo double packs 12 inches. That would be absolutely amazing. Dave, I honestly don't know. Sitting here this evening in June 2023, I would say I think that's unlikely. And there's a few different reasons for this. The biggest one is that all of those recordings are owned, well, they originally were owned by Food Records, which was licensed to EMI or co-owned, and now they're all controlled by Warner's Group. And Warner's Group are enormous, and quite frankly, they've got their attention on other things rather than re-releasing music from DUBSTAR. So in order for this to happen, it probably would require that these songs, these recordings of songs, would have to be licensed to somebody else in order for them to release them. Now, I did actually have quite extensive discussions with quite a big label around 2017, 2018 about doing this and doing like a kind of compendium of every DUBSTAR release. It was going to be enormous. It would have been a little bit like that collection that Manson brought out, like 20 CDs. So we got quite a long way into discussing the logistics of this. But the snag that we came up against was that basically Warner's, number one, weren't aware of what they had with regards to DUBSTAR. Number two, getting them to find what they had and then license it out was proving kind of basically impossible. And number three, and this is the big one, there's a bit of a question mark over what is actually owned by Warner's, as in which DUBSTAR recordings are actually controlled by them or are controlled by, well, we're not entirely sure, or at least me and the label. So it was what was going to be hopefully something really straightforward turned into a problem. Okay. And the thing was, the chances of this actually being profitable were quite low. If Warner's had re-released these tunes, because DUBSTAR was so incredibly unrecouped, which sort of means that DUBSTAR owed a lot of money to Warner's, kind of means that, that the chances of seeing any money from that project was very low. although with me being the main songwriter, there would have been quite a lot of money that would come through to me, but that would have created its own problems. So, man, it became like something that was more of a pain than it was going to be something enjoyable to do. And then various things happened in 2018, which basically meant that the whole thing kind of got put on a back burner. And then we had the pandemic, and everybody kind of moved on to new stuff and essentially, I suppose, basically forgot about DUBSTAR. I was warned that this sort of thing happens quite a lot, by the way. There's a friend of mine, a guy I worked with, who was also in a 90s band, singer in a 90s band. And this label was intending to bring out a big collection of his band. They had big hits, but they couldn't find him. But I knew exactly where he was. He basically lived just a street away from me. But he wasn't answering phone calls about this. As often happens with bands and acts, there can be politics within the units that means getting this stuff together is really difficult. So that compilation didn't happen. And it basically in the end means I can't see this happening anytime soon. But I would be quite happy to be proved wrong. And I suppose in the end, if there is a large enough demand for it, anything could happen really. So we'll have to park that one there. And if there's any movement on this as an idea, I will make sure you all know, particularly you, Dave. And that's it for part one of the DUBSTAR Archive question and answer session. I must thank you all for sending in these questions. My apologies if I didn't get round to answering yours. Also, I chose to answer just maybe one out of a whole stream of questions that you may have sent in. I will answer the rest of the questions, but I think, as I can feel my voice going, I should probably stop now. But before I go, I thought I might show you something that I discovered when I moved into this house. Oh, look at this. This is a silver disc for the Disgraceful album that was given to me. This one was given, I think it would have been, was it spring 1996? Of course, we all got one. But I gave this to my dad, who sadly isn't with us anymore, and got it back relatively recently, and I just stumbled across it again just before making this video, and I thought I'd share it. It looks pretty cool, doesn't it? Thanks for watching, guys. See you soon.